for me, I didn't see a white light. I didn't get pulled into a white light. I was just instantly on the other side. And so we ended up going to this room, this kind of white room, high up in the galaxies. Then my guides were gathered around this white kind of boardroom table, and I remember they rolled out what looked like blueprints. Before I came into this lifetime, I created that entire blueprint with my guides and my council. My soul was like, I want to learn this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and we create those things, and they kind of counsel us on, yes, definitely take on this experience. Maybe your experience is moving through grief or abundance. It could be any one of those. And they may counsel you on, your last lifetime was very challenging in grief. You might not be ready to take on grief again in this lifetime. So what if we save that for another time? There's a collaborative effort in our lifetime design for what we're going to do.
Can you tell me about the day of your near-death experience?
Yeah. So, it was during a routine surgery. I had been hemorrhaging a lot from my monthly cycles, and so we needed to do a pretty simple surgery to help me out at that point. And so we just kind of like went into it. Everything was all good and normal. And when they put me under, like I said, I was so excited. And for me, I didn't see a white light. I didn't get pulled into a white light. I was just instantly on the other side. And I knew instantly where I was. It wasn't like, where am I? What's happening? It was like, I knew exactly where I was. And I landed on the grass, bare feet. And the grass was like the most beautiful green grass. And I could zoom in on the details of the grass if I wanted to, just with my eyes. Like I could see the details in it, I could feel it fully. And I remember kind of walking up this sort of hill, and I came upon this kind of like a barbecue picnic scene. And I remember the sky was the most beautiful blue, just like that summer blue. Everything was so vibrant. And when I came upon this barbecue picnic kind of thing, I realized it was all different people that I knew from this lifetime and lifetimes before. And my grandmother was there, and she kind of like welcomed me into it. And I had the most amazing reunions with people. And it like there was no rushing it, but there was lots of them. I could see them coming forward, and I remember giving each of them hugs, and these hugs were like these most beautiful reunions. Like I always say, the hug was like when you have a little toddler who throws themselves in your arms because in that moment you are the best thing in the world to them. The hugs felt like that. Like each one was so um just like this divine energy. And I spent what felt like hours talking to them and reminiscing of like, what have you been up to and what are you doing now? Um and after I spent a long time there, at one point my grandmother said it was time to move on. And so we ended up going to this room, this kind of white room, high up in the galaxies, like where the galaxies or the universe is creating itself. And it was this white room, and outside the windows, I could see um, galaxies and stars, but also, again, like where the universe is still creating itself. Like it was really far. And then my guides were gathered around this white kind of boardroom table. And I remember they rolled out what looked like blueprints. Like it looked like legit architecture blueprints, but it was my life. And down the center of this blueprint was this kind of pulsing iridescent light moving back and forth. And I knew that that meant that I was still alive. But here I was sitting there with my guides or standing there with them, and we did a life review of everything in my life up until that very moment. And so I was like, okay, cool. But it wasn't until that moment when we got to where we were where they asked, like, now at this point, would you like to stay here or do you want to go back to Earth? And I remember thinking, like, oh, well, I want to go back to Earth. Like, it didn't dawn on me that it just simply was. And so they're like, you don't have to. And are you sure you want to go back? And I was like, yeah, I do want to go back. Like, I want to go back for my family and I've accomplished things and I'd like to continue. And and then so when I decided that I wanted to go back, what was interesting is I then got to see my higher self. And my higher self, which was, it's hard to explain, but my higher self looked like me, but I could see, I'll say her for that reference. I could see her standing in front of me, looking at me, but I could also be her, feeling like me, looking at me. So I was both. Both felt completely normal, and it felt completely normal to be in conversation with me, right? My higher version
Wow.
of everything that I am. And when I saw and felt the absolute beauty that my higher self saw in a lifetime, like how valuable our lifetimes are, with everything that we go through in them, like there's so much value on the soul level. And when I felt that, it was just like, yeah, like of course I want to go back. I don't want to lose what I've started here. And and so then again they asked, like, are you sure you want to stay, or you want to go back to Earth, or do you want to stay here? And they explained that if I was going to stay, it would be as simple as kind of flipping a switch and I would just have a heart attack on the table. And again, at no point was I like, no, 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 don't do that. Like there was no fear. There was, it was as if I had all the time in the world to decide, but I also just knew within my whole being that no, I want to go back. And so what was interesting is at that point, they they showed me the rest of my blueprint. And I can't tell because in my memory, I can't see how long of my blueprint we, like how much we went through. Like, was it 12 inches worth on this paper? Was it 8 inches? I know that the last remaining part looked about 6 or 8 inches, but I don't know what to compare it to because I don't have that memory kept. So I can't determine like how long I have left. But in what was remaining, I was able to, they said I could switch things around if I wanted. And this was so neat because I had seen and I had heard spirits talk about how we create our destiny and we create our soul blueprint before we come in. And then it's our free will that dictates how we maneuver that. And so there I was, and I was able to pull out some of these like juncture points or destiny points, and they kind of looked like fuses in a fuse box. And so I pulled the first one out, I remember represented chronic health issues because I had a ton of chronic health issues, and like I would be the one that would get sick first. I would get the sickest of anything that was out there. Like I would just always get sick. And when I pulled it out, they were like, yeah, you can take it out and replace it. Like you can choose what you want to create in this part of your life now. And I remember thinking, like, it's that easy. Like I just pull out this fuse and replace it. And they're like, yeah. And I remember thinking as I was putting in one that had better health, I remember thinking like, yeah, okay, we'll see. Because I was so used to being chronically ill. And so I put that new fuse in, and then they said you will remember the first one, but you won't remember the other ones until they happen, right? So you can change out the others. You're not going to have conscious memory of what they are, but you will this first one so that it's real to you. And so then after that, my grandmother brought me back, and this whole part happened at the same time. So after that, I remember hearing the nurse in the recovery room say, Jeanette, are you awake? And my surgery, I think it was like under an hour, and my whole experience felt like an entire day, right? And so she's like, Jeanette, are you awake? And within these same moments, I felt my spirit go like whoomp back into my body. I still had my eyes closed. And I could still feel my grandmother with me in spirit, but I heard my higher self speak through me because I've had surgeries before and I am not coherent after surgery. Like everything is funny, the room is bouncing to me, I'm slurring my words, like I don't make sense. And as soon as I popped in, my higher self said to the nurse with clarity, it was like, I need you to write something down. I need you to write down these 4 things. They're very important. And I need you to fold up the paper and put it in my hand. And she's like, okay, what is it you want to say? And so I gave her these 4 kind of word statements that really wouldn't make sense to anybody else. They were Great Baba, I have it up here, tree roots, time to entwine, and I went far. So to anybody else that doesn't like, okay, great. But what they were was these key words that would unlock the whole memory of everything. And so she folded it up. She was so sweet. She stopped what she was doing to write down what I said, folded it up, put it in my hand. I remember I held onto it like this. And then when they wheeled me into recovery, my mom was there. I gave her the paper and I said, "You cannot lose this paper." And then they gave me pain meds and everything. And I was out for a bit. And then it was a couple days later, once I was off any kind of pain meds, that spirit was like, "It's time for you to remember." Now, it's not that I didn't know anything happened because I remember once I came out of it, I was like absolutely enamored by everything on this planet. I was like, oh my gosh, how amazing is it that we have these blankets and these blankets keep us warm. And oh my gosh, this TV, like we've created TVs and we've created like it was as if I was seeing it with like fresh eyes at the simplicity of the things we have on the planet. And so, anyways, after a few days, when I read those words again, the entirety just like came right back into my mind, all the details. And I remember I was recuperating at my parents' house at that point, and I told them I went out into the backyard. I was like, I need to tell you all a story. I need to tell you what happened. And my mom actually took a snapshot of that moment of me telling them my story for the very first time. And so it was really interesting and absolutely transforming. And one of the things that I agreed to with my guides when I was on the other side was that if I was going to come back, I would make a point of sharing my story and speaking up about it and speaking about what I've learned from spirit to help others learn. It's not to convince anyone of anything, it's just to help people learn and see what resonates with them. And so it was a big changing point for me because it was soon after that I created my podcast. We created Avalon Spirit, YouTube pages. Like it was that starting point of something more. And so it was very transformative. But at the same time, as much as it was amazing and life changing, like truly my perspective has not been the same since. Like it's just different. I see suffering differently. Um, I it's just different. I don't know. It brought so much magic into my life to literally be there, even though I did a lot of mediumships before. However, there was also this like year or so of like acclimating back to human life and the density here after being in that energy on the other side, because the energy there is just like pure like bliss and harmony. And it's not bliss in excess like we think on this planet. When we think of bliss, we think of just like absolute bliss, like nothing better is like almost excessive. There it's like balance. Like everything is in harmony. And when you come to this planet after remembering that, it's very hard to be here in the density and the motions and the sadness and the suffering. And it took me a little while to really wrap my head around having had that experience and how to be human again. Because it also taught me the perspective of the spirit and the soul is in that perspective of balance and harmony. So when we agree to come to this planet and have experiences, we're looking at it from that perspective and what we gain from it. But then the human perspective here is the one that is having to take on the density and the suffering and the whatever. So it took me a little while to kind of find where those two fit in my world now after having such an undeniable experience.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I have so many more questions for you. What an interesting experience. And I think the first question I'd love to start with is you mentioned that you see suffering differently. How so?
Yeah, so this is so delicate, right? It is so delicate because we can't just put a blanket statement on suffering and have that be okay. And then what I mean by that is to say, like, everything happens for a reason. So therefore, don't be so sad, right? That's kind of what it makes us feel, right? If everything happens for a reason, then we should just believe everything happens for a reason. Then, okay, this suffering I'm going through, whether it's the loss of somebody or an illness you're experiencing or whatever it might be, should be okay. But there is a very human aspect to the experience of suffering, right? Like, it is very human to experience suffering because we live on a planet that has such polarity and duality, right? So to know the light, we need to know the dark. Helps us appreciate the light more. But at the same time, where it changed my perspective on suffering is when we know that, then we need to bring more light into those moments of suffering. And that's a really hard thing to do. And again, I don't say that lightly as if it's easy. But that's where we can kind of pull some power is in the moments of suffering, our greatest moments. Where can we bring in that light to change the perspective of that suffering? And again, that's not a blanket statement, easy thing. This past summer, I had an opportunity to experience some great suffering. And I remember in some of those moments, I had to dig so deep, like so deep to see how can I see light in this? How can I possibly see light in this with everything I've experienced? And for me, it was reflecting on a time in which I suffered more, right? And in this case, for me, it was physical suffering. And I was like, okay, so this is awful. This is absolutely awful. What would be worse? And for me in that moment, I was like, well, when I was in labor, it was way worse than this.
Mm,
So I'm technically grateful right now that I'm not in that experience of labor. And that pulling the light into that darkness helps shift my perspective of suffering in that moment to make it more tolerable or to be able to
mm,
shift it. Like that's the parts where we have the power. It's not always easy. Absolutely. But when we can bring that in, we can see that through suffering we get to learn so much. And through the healing from the suffering, we also get to learn on a soul level how we can be more resilient, how we can grow, how we can release the attachments to maybe even other things that keep us in that energy of suffering.
how you say you had the opportunity to experience suffering. That's something I'm gonna have to say to myself now too. What an interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about the idea of a council? You said that it was your council who showed you your blueprint. Who is
Hmm.
that?
So we all have like a council of spirit guides, right? I call it a council. I think people would have lots of names for it, but we definitely have more than just one spirit guide. We have several different ones that do different things for us. Some of them are lifetime guides. Some come in at certain times in our lives to help us through an event or a situation or something like that. And so for me, they all came forward and presented themselves at this table to do my life review. And it's kind of like the way I could explain it is if you were in university and say you were writing your thesis or something, and you sit at the boardroom table with all your professors who are putting in input and reviewing what you've produced. It's kind of like we were reviewing what I'd produced in my life, but none of it was with judgment. So when we think of that situation and we think of university professors reviewing our thesis, we think judgment. But on the other side, there was no judgment. It was all supportive energies of the good and the bad, right? Like I've done things in my life I'm not proud of. I've done things in my life I'm so proud of, and everything in between, right? We all have, because that's part of being human. And when you do your life review with your guides or your counsel, they are helping you to understand the whys and the actions behind what happened, good, bad, or anything in between. And so it's actually a really beautiful, supportive process. So even for people that, are listening and maybe have had, a very challenging life, and maybe they have a lot of shame or regret or guilt, that moment in your life review is so supportive from spirit. I mean, you can't get away from it. You're going to experience all the things and see them, but it's not in a place of hateful judgment like I think sometimes old traditions or old religions like to state. It's not that, it's very supportive.
That's awesome. What did your blueprint say? Was it kind of like a step-by-step plan for your life? Was it something that you planned yourself before you came to Earth? What
Mm.
exactly was on there?
Yeah, so it didn't have words. It looked a little bit more like if you ever ride like the subway or the train or SkyTrain or whatever, and you look at the map and it has like a central line and then it has these like deviation points kind of. Sort of looked like that. Okay, kind of looked like that. And that's the closest I could explain it. And each of those points represent like what I call a destiny point, something that your soul wishes to learn in this lifetime. And so before I came into this lifetime, I created that entire blueprint with my guides and my counsel. We stood at that same table. We were like, my soul was like, I want to learn this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And they're like, okay, we're going to put in a near death experience like somewhere around here. And I'm like, yeah, high five. Sounds great. Let's do it. Like we create those things and they kind of counsel us on, yes, definitely take on this experience. Maybe your experience is moving through grief, I don't know, or abundance. It could be any one of those. And they may counsel you on, your last lifetime was very challenging in grief. You might not be ready to take on grief again in this lifetime. So what if we save that for another time? And then you're like, okay, so I won't do that. Like there's a collaborative effort in our lifetime design for what we're going to do. And that's why after we complete the lifetime, we review it with them and go over like what worked, what didn't. And that's where we decide what we want to bring into a next lifetime, right? So if we find there was, say, addictions was a thing that just never, you couldn't move through it in this lifetime, oftentimes people will bring that into a next lifetime to be able to transcend it in some form.
That's so interesting. And I'm very interested in the idea of past and future lives. You mentioned that you saw people from your past lives at the picnic. Did you remember your past lives in that moment? Like, did they come flooding back to you?
So that's a great question. I already have memory of some of my past lives that I've picked up over the years at different points where it's been valuable for me to know it. So I have a recollection of several. In that moment, though, on the other side, I knew exactly where I knew them from, but for me to pinpoint exactly who from what lifetime, I couldn't tell you. But but I knew each and every one of them. So it's kind of like if you had like a party and you had a whole bunch of different friends come by from different friend groups of like and different groups that you're part of. It's a mixed mash of people, but you know each and every one of them. It's like that feeling. But I couldn't tell you exactly who from where because it was more energetic. And I had somebody ask me one time, like what they looked like. Like, did they look like people? Did they look like orbs? Did they look like energy? They looked like all three at the same time. And again, that doesn't make sense to our human mind, but in my memory, I can see them as energy, I can see them as an orb, I can see them as the person, but it's all one and the same. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but so to answer your question, like, yes, I knew they were from past lives, but I couldn't tell you which one.
Okay.
But the ones from this lifetime, I could.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm wondering about when you pulled out the chronic health issues from your blueprint. Did that then get better
Hmm.
since?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. That one, it took me about a year to actually believe that it was legitimate, right? Because like I said, when I put it in, I'm like, okay, we'll see. And I was so surprised to see that I wasn't getting sick all the time. Does that mean I never catch a cold now or something? I do. But like my whole family can get sick, and being a mom, I can take care of everybody and not end up sick. Whereas before, if anyone got sick, I knew I would have it. Like, here we go, great. Like, um, or if there's something going around, say around the hockey team or the dance team or whatever, I would always pick it up and I don't. So my resilience now is actually really interesting to see. It's very, very different than it was before. And I love that. And it took me, like I said, it took me that year to really understand that I'm in a different energy now than I was before. But I do want to echo that doesn't mean that I can't get sick, right? Because part of my suffering this past summer was I had one more surgery, which apparently was in my blueprint that I'd put in there. But I ended up getting an infection after that, and then my liver shut down. And it was a series of events based on also free will choices, which is a whole other story. And I had to experience this suffering, and it was really hard for me because at first I was like, I thought we agreed, I thought I took it out that I would have no more chronic suffering. And my guides were very clear. They're like, this isn't chronic suffering. This is suffering based on free will choices. They had encouraged me to get the surgery a year before, and I said, no, I'm too busy. I want to do this, this, and this, which would deplete my body energy. Um, and so, again, like it was this neat review again of what I had changed in my blueprint and understanding it more and realizing, even through this experience of suffering and infections this summer, how resilient my body is, anyways. And so it's just been this like when I say opportunity for suffering, it's not said lightly in an easy way, but it's said in a way of like when we hold that perspective, we really can glean so much more from the experience. Like we can see beyond just the suffering and start to understand the why or what it's connected to.
I feel like personally it's so hard sometimes to find that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's like that for everyone.
Hmm.
You said something that was really interesting about free will. So, if we are planning our lives before we come, how does free will come into that if it's something we've already determined ahead of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the blueprint is your base blueprint for your life, right? But your free will gets to dictate how you maneuver that blueprint, right? So you're going to come across these destiny pieces, these chunks that you desire to learn, these lessons, right? But you have the opportunity with your destiny or with your free will to choose the way in which you're going to approach that, right? So if I
Mhm.
use this past summer as an example, um, in my blueprint was to so my first surgery was to kind of lessen the hemorrhaging, right? My second surgery that I had this past summer was to actually just remove my uterus because other things we'd done, it was just time. Long story short. And so that was very peaceful for me. But although that was in my path and I had a beautiful experience during that surgery, not an NDE, but a different experience, although that was in my path, my free will dictated how that would play out.
Mhm.
And so my guides, like I said, had suggested you should really do this destiny point ASAP. But my free will choice was like, hey, no, I'm not going to. I'm actually going to push it off because I have this and this dance thing I really want to do. It's going to take a year. I'll do it after. And they're like, it's going to take a big toll on your body. You really should do this sooner. Again, that's where they're trying to follow my blueprint and align it with what's going on. My choice was, no, no, I'm going to wait. I can do it. I can push through it. I'm fine. So my free will choices led to me having a much bigger recovery than what it could have been because it's how I decided to maneuver the blueprint. So we go through those experiences on all kinds of different levels every day, right? Like, say you're in a job that you don't really like, but it's a stepping stone to your next job. But if you don't recognize you're not happy in it and you want to change it, well, then you could delay that next step by 10 years if your free will is choosing to stay in this job you don't like. Or
Mhm.
is your free will choosing to, you know what, this isn't aligning for me. I'm going to find something different now because I'm ready to move on. That's how we get to maneuver that. So the spirit describes it like the blueprint is a set river. The river meanders how it is. We can't change that. But the free will is you in a boat and you choose how you're going to move along that river. If you're going to stop here, if you're going to go use all your gas, go back upriver, or if you're going to work with the flow of the river. Kind of how it plays out.
That's great advice. So, you had your guides counseling you, suggesting you should do the surgery earlier. What about people who aren't in contact with their guides? Do they get signs or signals too?
Hmm. Science and symbolisms and signals, they're all around us all the time. Spirit uses them all the time, from number patterns, dream state info, to certain animals or meanings in the animals, to songs that pop up on the radio when we're thinking of something, or you overhear a conversation that validates. something. Like, say, for example, um, somebody is wanting to, let's just say, get a hysterectomy. And I'm not promoting or not promoting this, just for the example.
Mhm.
Say they're like, I really don't know if this is in my interest. I feel like it might be. Then they're in the lineup at Starbucks. The people in front of them are like, yeah, my sister just got a hysterectomy yesterday. It was the best thing she ever did. And they happen to overhear that in that time frame where they're pondering it, right? Like the universe has so many ways to put us in different positions to receive signs. The thing is a lot of people still think it's just coincidence.
Mhm.
And so what I always recommend to people is if you're looking for signs and symbolisms from your guides, ask for it to come in a series of 3,
Mm.
right? So if you're like, please help me, I can't hear you at all. Can you bring through this in signs, but make it happen in 3s? And so say maybe your sign is a ladybug, right? Maybe the first one, you say it that morning, and later that afternoon or the next day, there's a ladybug on your window. And you're like, okay, there's one ladybug. Second one, say somebody gives you a card, and on the card, there's a ladybug. You're like, okay, that's 2 ladybugs in like a day and a half. And then maybe the next night you come home and your family's watching a documentary, and there's ladybugs all over the screen on this nature documentary, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be the single ladybug landing on you 3 times. It can come in different ways. And so you can really communicate to your spirit guides kind of what your sign or symbol is that you really want to hear. And also, again, have them bring it to you in 3s. Because then you can start to kind of build that communication. And they honestly, they want nothing more than to communicate. They want to
Mhm.
communicate with you. It's just we have to recognize the subtle ways that they do.
I kind of got a like kind of shivers like a ladybug is what kind of my sign connection with just like a family thing. So that's
Hmm.
interesting that
Nice.
you use that example.
That's awesome.
Have your abilities as a medium changed since your near death experience?
They really kind of skyrocketed. And that was an adjustment as well, to be honest. What I could access and the higher realms I could access, or where I could astral travel to, and the level of consciousness that was coming down for me to interpret, it was a lot, right? So, like, as amazing as it was also this like big shift in consciousness that I needed to learn how to ground and bring into this reality because, I mean, spirit can communicate word for word, like we're communicating right now, but oftentimes they actually just drop sort of like a thought bubble. And in that bubble, it's instant, but you could have 3 paragraphs of information in that bubble, right? And so it's about like how to interpret what's coming in. As well, I found my capacity for clairvoyance increased a lot after that NDE too. And I think, honestly, I think when you consciously experience the other side like that and you bring back the memories of it, you can't help but bring back the frequency of it. And if you bring
Okay.
back the frequency of it, then you have access to that level of frequency. And so it's kind of like you can't unknow that frequency, and therefore that frequency starts to come into your world more. So I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm so curious about mediumship and clairvoyancy. I guess there wouldn't be a typical session, but kind of what happens when you enter that space for other people and do
Yeah.
that work?
So, when I tune in first, the person, I'll sit down with the person and then I always start by closing my eyes. And when I close my eyes, I'm kind of shutting out the visual cues in my world and it allows me to like sink in. And I kind of sink in because spirit told me a long time ago that the gateway to anything spirit is through the heart space. So I just kind of sink in and go into my heart. And then from there, um, I start to see when I call in spirit and those of whoever I'm reading for, I start to see these pinpricks of light kind of look like stars and they start to kind of show themselves. And that's when I can usually count, like, oh, there's 7 spirits here or 3 spirits here. And then they will start to come closer. And when they come in within my energy field, like when we merge energies, when I'm able to see who they are, and they'll either manifest what they look like or a storyline for me to see. or certain images or symbolisms, like they could show me ladybugs, right? Um, or I will hear it, feel it. There's a lot of ways in which it comes in, and it's just kind of really opening up to the subtleties. Because the thing with mediumship, it's
Mm.
really about learning a language of subtleties. And not every mediumship reading is me seeing a spirit standing behind somebody in 3D, right? Or I call it 4D physical. I can see spirits in fourth dimension. So the person would look back and not see anything, but I can see them because they're showing themselves in a physical matter, but in a fourth dimension frequency. But most of the communication actually happens in 5D and higher. And again, it's subtleties, it's subtle differences. And the more you learn mediumship, the more you can understand because you're seeing, hearing, and feeling those subtle cues which get louder
It's
and
so
louder over time.
interesting. Do you have stories about
Yeah.
in your mediumship connecting with the other side or receiving messages from the other side as a medium, like not through your near death experience?
One story that's really neat, that's always really stuck with me is this was something I always wondered as a kid. And it's funny when you look back at some of the things you wondered as a kid and you wonder why, and as you become an adult, you're like, oh, that's why. Uh, Becoming a medium explains why I wondered this. But as a kid, I would always wonder, if someone falls out of a plane, do they die before they hit the ground, or do they have to hit the ground and die? Like, would they have a heart attack and leave first, or they have to smush, right? And I had a spirit explain this to me one time in a reading, and they were hit by a car. And so there's two of them, I'll tell you. So the first one, this woman was driving and she actually had a head-on collision with a semi. She was in a smaller car and she hit the semi head-on. And she showed me, she slowed it down, that when her car was about an inch and a bit away from hitting the semi, so just before, she said she left her body. And she's like, I didn't stay in my body for the impact. And in fact, most of the time, people don't. And so when we see those really gruesome accidents or injuries that are, well, not injuries, but the accidents where the person dies, but their body is very injured, they're not there for that. They actually are pulled out before. And I've seen that a lot in readings too. I've had a lot of them confirm that. I had another one too that told me he had run across the street to go get his dog, to run and grab his dog, and a car hit him. And his memory was he ran across the street and then kept running to get his dog, and then was like, I can't really get my dog. I can't pick up my dog. And was like, what? And then he turned around and realized he'd actually been hit by a car and he was on the ground. And so the transition to from like waking life and death, spirit desires to help it be so seamless and the least amount of pain possible. That doesn't mean it is always pain free, but majority of the times when there's a massive injury or accident, the person was pulled out of their body before, or they don't have a recollection of the actual death part. Um, Even when we see somebody in a hospital, I've seen people when they've been kind of in a coma or really near death where they're no longer talking anymore. Their body may be making kind of moaning noises and they look like they're in pain. I've seen where the soul, like if this is the body, the soul is actually hovering just above the body. So the soul's not in the body feeling that. That's a physical reaction that's happening. And so it actually brought a lot of comfort in understanding the process of dying, that it is meant to be as seamless as possible, um, that actual point of dying. I've also seen people when they've crossed over where if they suffered a long illness before, like say they had cancer or something, and their suffering was such, the moment in which they pass is so beautiful, in which spirit is right there with them. And oftentimes they either just lift out of the body, or I've seen someone sit up out of their body, get up, and just be like, "Ugh," and then cross into the light. So we we fear conversations of dying. I mean, I think we're getting better at it, but there's a lot of fear around the conversations of dying. But in truth, so much of it is supported by the spirit realm and by the soul and higher self of the
Hmm.
person also.
That
So
is,
it's
and
it's
I'm
quite
grateful
beautiful.
you shared those stories because I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this channel is wanting to eliminate fears of death and help people who are really anxious about that. So, thank you. I've really appreciated
Yeah.
your like our time here together. Do you have any final advice for our viewers who are watching this right now?
Yeah. The most significant thing that I've carried with me since my NDE is, again, the value of our human life, even in the struggle and even in the tough times, in the loneliness and the grief and all of that. There is such a value of every single human life in what they're learning and what they're acquiring as a soul. And I'm saying this as a general statement because I know there are outliers that we could debate, right? But generally, your life is so valuable to your soul, to the collective, that the best thing you could do is try, honestly, to make the most of it. Do everything you desire to do. See everything you desire to see, because the whole purpose of having a human lifetime is to experience. There's a huge value in coming to Earth and experiencing the depth of polarity that we have and the emotional capacity we have, plus this transformative time. And if we focus on living and creating the life that we want versus feeling stuck in the life that we are, we have the opportunity to gain so much soul knowledge that we carry with us on the other side. And that's such a part of why we're here, is to gain soul knowledge. So if you remember that, then you can make the most of what you're doing here, so that when you cross over with the satisfaction of like, look what I did. I did a lot. And that doing a lot doesn't mean you have to live till 99. I've talked to souls that were even children, or teenagers or young adults that crossed over, but the amount that they took in their experience was significant. So no life is disregarded and every life has value. And so it's really about living it to the fullest.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I guess my final question, can you tell me a bit more about your book and how people can maybe get in touch with you or follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my book details my whole surgery experience. It's called Avalon to Aurora, a medium's near-death experience. It's on Amazon, so easy to find. And then if you are interested in what I do, avalonspirit.com is our landing page for everything, for the course offerings that we have. I teach courses on mediumship for people to open up their connection to spirit. Um, and then as well as my podcast, the Jeanette Byro podcast, which I do put on YouTube, which is under Jeanette Byro Medium. I do daily postings on YouTube as well. And then I also have Facebook and Instagram, which is Jeanette Byro Medium too. So I'm on social media a lot, sharing tips and ideas and channeled messages and spirit messages and uh, card readings, even though I don't use cards in my mediumship sessions or what I do, but Spirit was like, share messages through cards because everyone takes something from the images too. So there's a lot that I do now, because again, I agreed to do that when I came back from my NDE.
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah,
yes, I'm very grateful you did. This was an amazing conversation. So thank you so much.
thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this video on T&H Afterlife. I really appreciate all of our amazing viewers and all the incredible comments that are left on our videos. If you like this video, here's another one that you might like to watch. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to T&H Afterlife. Thank you.